About 6 months ago, I found myself lying on my stomach on a dirty carpet, surrounded by professional actors, trying to channel a penguin. I'm a marine biologist, but I live far away from the ocean in London. And lately, I've been spending a lot more time on the underground than underwater. I love finding and understanding new ways that people connect to nature. And so I went and signed up for a theatre workshop called Working in Animal, which would require me to inhabit an animal for 3 days. And I chose to be a penguin. And the reasons for that were that I was told that I was not allowed to do an exclusively marine animal because I needed to think about how an animal moved on land, and also that it needed to be an animal that I could go and see in person. So I managed to convince a friend to let me into London Zoo, and I took my notebook, I took my pencil, I took my pens, I took my camera, and I went and observed penguins for 3 hours. And one of the things that I noticed about them is that their movements are a lot jerkier than I would have expected, seeing them in things like animations. So the next day, I jumped on the tube to Elephant and Castle, and I climbed the stairs of a building where at the very top of it, there was a room with brick walls and a blue carpet. The room was filled with professional actors, which I will remind you again, I am not. And the theatre director who was leading the workshop, whose name was Gabrielle. Gabrielle had her hair piled on top of her head, and she kicked things off by saying, "Everyone, just do whatever warm-up feels best to you," which was very intimidating to me, and everyone else just started shaking around and humming and tapping themselves, and I honestly was just kind of imitating whoever I could. And then Gabrielle said, "Now it's time to go into your animal." So she told us to close our eyes and to stand there because she knew that we'd be self-conscious. And I just stood there with my eyes closed, feeling incredibly self-conscious, and sometimes peeking through my eyelids to watch what other people were doing as they became herons and penguins. No one else was a penguin, just me. As they became herons and gorillas and all sorts of other animals. And the first movement that I found enabled me to actually get into my penguin was doing some sort of preen. So just kind of like putting my neck down like that as if to ruffle my feathers. And it felt like the first sort of genuine movement that a penguin might make. I did have some challenges as I was trying to be a penguin. So for example, the main way that they walk around is a little bit of a waddle. So I was trying to do that, but of course, their anatomy is completely different to ours. Their femurs are much shorter, so when I was trying to stand the way that they do, it was pretty easy to go off balance. I also found that when I'd been watching them in the zoo, they looked most peaceful when they were lying on their stomachs. And that was not the same experience for me. The carpet in the room was filthy, and I was just trying to keep my face as far away from it as I possibly could. But I did have one good moment, which was when I finally gathered up the courage that first day to hop onto one of the boxes that were scattered around the room as props. When I went back that evening and I was sitting on the tube, I was just thinking about what an impossible task this was, to try to understand and to kind of push myself to inhabit a non-human being. And when I came back the next day, I stood there and I closed my eyes again, trying to channel the penguin. And Gabrielle was weaving around the room in between everybody, going, And suddenly I had this moment where I had my eyes closed, and it was like this strange simplicity. All of a sudden, I was a penguin. And it was kind of peaceful and meditative because I didn't have to think about anything but being a penguin. And waddling and kind of like shaking my tail and preening and anything like that. And it was really nice. I noticed that I didn't feel self-conscious anymore. Because if I was being silly, everyone in the room was being equally silly. And actually, we were all taking it unbelievably seriously. And I then had this moment where I found myself crouched on top of one of these boxes, my rock, channeling my penguin, imagining snow and ice stretching out all around me. And I opened my eyes to look around the room, and I felt this emotion bloom in my chest. And it was pure envy, because I was looking over at a fox who was on another box, and their rock looked so much better than mine. And it made me think about how, as humans, we project our way of seeing onto all of these other beings, right? And the fact that, even though as humans we have the potential to be able to change the circumstances and the issues that they're facing, we, see the world in very different ways. When I started that workshop, I thought that I was going to be thinking very deeply about climate change and the melting ice caps and reductions in krill and how all those things are affecting penguins and how terrible it is. And instead, what I had discovered deep inside myself was this primal urge to knock an actor off a pedestal. And at the end of the workshop, Gabrielle said to all of us, "Remember, this animal is now within you. You can call it back anytime just by making a small movement." And we all left and went home. And a few weeks later, I was back on the tube, and it was rush hour, and I was surrounded by all these people who were wearing headphones and staring vacantly. And I had this moment where I just thought, I am a penguin. And I just did like a little mini preen, which probably looked to someone else like I just had a crick in my neck. But it did actually conjure up this real sense of peace and the ocean, even though I was right in the middle of London. Thank you.